Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
These shows are brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation in partnership with the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, we have a great guest today and an important topic, and it's really important because starting tomorrow, it's Baby Loss Awareness Week. So it's great to have an expert on baby loss on our show today. Would you like to introduce her, Heidi?
Sure, I'd love to, Mom. So today our guest is Barb Himes, and she is the Director of Education and Bereavement Services for First Candle National SIDS Alliance. Her 2-month-old son, Jake, died on December 24th, 1981. And let's see, she is the co-chair of the Child Care and Early Education Action Team for National Action Partnership to Promote Safe Sleep. She serves on numerous committees, and she is a board member for the International Society for the Study and Prevention of Perinatal and Infant Death. And Mom, she is also a national and an international speaker. Welcome to the show, Barb.
Thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. This afternoon, for everybody different.
It's so great to have you on. We love your organization. We got a wonderful award from them a few years ago for the work we were doing with grief and loss in New York City. And it was really wonderful. It's a wonderful organization that you have. You lost your child at an early age. How many years ago was it? And how was the grief and loss world at that time? Because I will tell you, we've already had somebody on Facebook text this in and say, my child died as a crib death 40 years ago, and I was investigated by the police.
I was fortunate in that we were not investigated, but so many people were. Our son was 2 months old as well and died sometime through the night. We woke on Christmas Eve morning to find him not breathing in his crib.
How many years ago was that?
Well, that will be 37 this year. First responders came and tried to resuscitate him, and the timing for our son's death was very unique in that they had just started a task force. They had been educating first responders. And so we really, from the first person that arrived at our house, which was a state trooper, to a public health nurse that came several weeks later, everyone treated us sensitively and compassionately. And I believe that set the tone for our healing process. I don't think I would be here today talking about it if I had been treated the way so many other families were treated. And which was really what kind of drew me to this work, because I didn't think I could do anything to keep babies from dying, but I thought maybe I can do something to keep families from being treated so inappropriately. So that was really my mindset. I heard so many stories of families that newspaper folks were at their door, cameras in their bushes, trying to film the families coming.
So Barb, it sounds like people were treated like criminals, like they had burned children. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Parents separated and interrogated.
And they would put it in the newspaper.
Yes.
Yes. On the news.
Yes, they certainly would.
They would show the families and say, this baby died and we're, not sure.
Right. First Candle is a not-for-profit organization that we really started as a grassroots efforts of parents that wanted to support one another during their loss. And then all the Back to Sleep campaign came about, and that gave us then something to do as far as trying to focus on preventing those deaths so that we could reduce the risk of babies dying of SIDS. Now we know a lot of them are accidental suffocation, and then 26,000 stillbirths each year. So large numbers of babies that are dying that weren't getting the that support that they needed. Mm-hmm. So we really started as a bereavement group, and we continue to do that. That's really important to us, that parents know that they're not alone and that they have support if they experience the loss of their baby. We have online Facebook support group, and we have 3 of them actually. We have one for stillbirth, we had one for miscarriage, and we have one for infant loss. Because we know parents they tend to gravitate toward those who have similar experiences.
Right. And there's a difference between the three. I mean, I've had 2 miscarriages, and the more that I talk to people about stillbirth and infant loss, the more I realize it's a different. There's different kinds of things that are going on. Like,
There are.
It's nice to be, hooked up with somebody that has had the same loss as you.
And yes, that you can share that with and have a common bond, I think. Even in support groups, when we have different losses, you'll see it breaks, the parents will gravitate towards one another that they know have, if it's their first baby or if they have other children. So their experiences are more on the same line. A loss is a loss, despite, the time. You don't, it doesn't matter how long you've had your child. If you lose them, you miss them. And it's just like having 5 fingers. You can't, they all are significant. You can't do without one.
And to some people, they're more significant to others than others too. I think, the circumstances around it, mean a lot, and how you deal with your losses. So yeah, it's not to minimize. Well,
see that kind of winding road of that grief journey, and there's some really vivid, beautiful flowers, and there's some greenery, and there's some darker flowers. And so, that grief journey just kind of winds around, and you enjoy some of the beautiful things, and then you're kind of pulled back again. So it's not just a straight journey. It's not a straight path. It's not a do X, Y, Z to get through it. You just have to kind of maneuver yourself around. And we all find guilt in the things that we do. I thought a healthy baby to bed that night, and woke up to find that he had died sometime through the night. I was certain it was something that I had done. I rehashed what I did the day before, what I did the night before, what I did the week before, what I did my whole pregnancy. You try to find something to blame for that loss, for that death. And we have to empower ourselves to say, there wasn't anything that we did intentional. It was an accident, and that you can't beat yourself up about those things. I get it. They're hard. It is. It's difficult to not, but I think that's just the nature of being a parent, is that you think you're supposed to be all and all and do all.
And take care of your children.
If there are subsequent children, is that baby going to die too? Was it something I did? I had 2 older children when our son Jake died, and a 3 and a 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old was a girl, and the 3-year-old was a little boy that would take his little brother's cheeks and pinch him. And I said, "Oh, don't do that. You're going to hurt the baby." Well, he still did it, and his sister saw that, and then the baby dies. So you can see the connection there, that she thinks this must have been something he did. He thinks it must have been something he did. There are so many dynamics that go into the grief.
There's so much magical thinking with
yes.
And we had someone on our show. His name is Jason Stout, and he was 5 when his 4-year-old sister died, and he thought it was his fault. And his mother saw the show because they'd been jumping on the bed or something, and she fell off. It was something like that. His mother saw the show and called him and said, "Oh, that's not why that had nothing to do with you guys playing together." So all these years he had carried this magical thinking that he had somehow been responsible, and it wasn't true.
Yes. And then grandparents' grief. I remember my mom telling me, I'm so sorry, and I wish there was something I could do. And she really was struggling with that. So it was kind of a double loss. She lost her grandson, but she also saw her daughter struggling, and there wasn't a Band-Aid that she could put on that. But what I told her, which was really important to me, is that she had given me a good, sound foundation, and a belief system, and a healthy attitude, that I think it's what got us through those difficult times. You might not be really excited when you find out you're pregnant. And this wasn't good timing. I had all these other plans. And then you know, you get used to it, and this is our life, and you have a baby, and then something happens, and so then again, some of that guilt, moms that have to go back to work feel, you know, like I didn't want to go back, I had to, you know, there's just so many dynamics that come together in
or moms that want to go back to work and feel guilty for wanting to do that.
Yes, because oftentimes that first babies die in childcare in that first week that they've gone back, that their first week of childcare, and something happens. So again, it's easy for those.
I like what you're saying, Barb, because these are things that people don't talk about, so too embarrassed and shameful. I mean,
Oh,
maybe I didn't want to be pregnant, and then I had this baby, and I leaned into it, and then all of a sudden the baby dies. People don't really talk about these kind of things very much.
They don't. And again, more of that stuff that they just carry, you know, we carry with us. I remember everybody would say, "How's your wife?" to my husband. "How's Barb? How's your wife?" And they didn't ask him how he was. And I even said to one of his friends, "Talk to him. He needs some support too." And he said, I don't know what to say. I said, "Just bring it up. He'll talk if you bring it up." But everyone's afraid to do anything or say anything because they think you're not thinking about it. And even between my husband and I wouldn't bring it up if he didn't, because I think he's having a good day and I don't want to bring him down. And he would do the same thing when it was on our minds. It was heavy on our minds all the time.
So Barb, I had a question. After you had your son died, did you fear, I know you had another child after that, did you fear that that baby was going to die?
I did. And even more so, I feared that I had pushed to have that baby, and that if something happened, that then I was responsible to my family again for this. I mean, gosh, don't we just find a lot of ways to be guilty about things? You know, but I knew we wanted Jake. Why wouldn't we want to have another child?
Right.
And I worried and fretted the whole time I was pregnant. And then for those 2 months until he got beyond that, I mean, I worried at each milestone. It was like, and then when we got 2 months out and we got through that, then it was like I could really breathe another sigh of relief. But it was very scary. I remember before I left the hospital with our first subsequent child, and the doctor came in, and he kind of was uncomfortable with me too. And finally I said, "You know, I know if I had been to your office that same day, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of things. I don't think you could have done anything either." And I could almost see relief in his face, in that he had been in practice for 30 years, and that was only the second baby he had ever lost to sudden infant death syndrome. So it's a rippling effect when a baby dies. It truly is. And after that, I said to the pediatrician, "I may be at your office more and it might not be needed, but please be patient with me." And he just hugged me and he said, "You're fine. We'll get through this."
Wow, I love the we will get through this.
Yes.
Well, we've got a comment here from Susan. "I gave my husband a picture of the baby and he put it on the desk at his office."
Oh, I love that.
That's awesome.
You know, especially these tiny babies that are teeny tiny, and people are going to say, "Oh, is that your baby?"
Yeah.
And we'll give them an opportunity to talk about it.
Yes, definitely.
Great idea.
That is a wonderful idea. I love that. This next picture, I kind of think it really is very telling. I do a lot of training, and two things that really stuck, that stand out in some of the things that I've done. And we, our support group had a memorial service every year, and we had it and had a little ceremony. And then afterwards we had cookies and punch. And so most everybody was there were people that we knew through the support group, and maybe their extended family. But there was one elderly gentleman that we didn't recognize, but I went over afterwards and introduced myself. And he told me that his son had died 30 some years before. And of course, this was like, you got to remember, this was probably 25 years ago. So he said, he died and I never had a chance to memorialize him. And I saw this the promotion for this memorial service, and I came, and I just want to thank you for giving me a venue to be able to remember my son and say his name out loud.
Wow.
And it's just so telling that we carry these losses with us forever. We're changed forever. I was doing a safe sleep training at a hospital, and one of the nurses came up to me afterwards and she said, I'd like to share a story with you. And I said, oh, that's great. I love hearing stories. And she was about my age, and she said, my mother has Alzheimer's and she's in a nursing home, and I go have dinner with her every evening, and she doesn't know my name. She doesn't know who I am. And yet every evening at dinner, she talks about my sister who died at a couple of months of age, and she calls her by name. And she doesn't remember my name sitting right across the table from her and doesn't know that I'm her daughter. But how impactful those losses are, that, you know, so many years later as dementia sets in, and she doesn't always know her daughter. That loss is so significant that it's ingrained in our memory.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. My husband's baby brother was stillborn, you know, over 70 years ago. And since I've gotten into the field of grief and loss, he's talked about him a little bit. And it's been interesting because he's said, oh, I always wondered what it would be like to have an older brother. And I always, you know, envied the people who didn't have older brothers. And it's so, you know, it's so neat for him to talk about, about it now, because it's so much part of life. And
well, when he was growing up, it was taboo, wasn't it, Mom? They never talked about it in their family, did they?
No, not at all. In fact, he had a birth defect, and they didn't tell his mother. They said the baby was perfect, which probably made a harder life for her.
Yes, definitely. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So
wow.
Now we've got a different realm. Now we're taking pictures, and the hospitals hopefully are more sensitive about it, and we're considering them, a part of the family situation.
Well, and I think when you lose a baby or have a miscarriage or have a stillborn, you're grieving not just that loss, but you're grieving the future. And every year you're like, how old would they be? What would they be like? I wonder what they would look like. What would they be doing? And it's like every year you kind of revisit where they might be, and you see kids their age doing things, and, then you time travel back to what if my child was here?
Oh, that's so true. My sister had a baby 6 weeks before Jake was born, and my brother had a baby that was born on the day that Jake was buried. And they were all boys. And so we had 3 little boys that should have been there growing up together. And so I watched them at each milestone as they crawled and walked and, started school and got their driver's license. And now they're marrying and having children. And it's always a reminder that you should have one in there. And the kids always say, would he have looked like the darker ones in the family or the lighter ones? Would he have had lighter hair, eyes, or, so it's something that just kind of stays with you at all those turning points in your life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I wondered, I know people that are listening and watching it are wondering, how did you get through? How did you get to the point where you are now? What did you do early on?
Boy, I think back and wonder about that myself. How did we get through it? I was thinking about this in preparing for this today. And I remember wondering, why me? I remember wondering, I didn't think things like that happened to me. I'm the second oldest of 9 children. We didn't have any illnesses, any deaths, elderly grandparents. That was it. And so it was really difficult And I remember thinking, I didn't have good coping mechanisms because I hadn't experienced loss except, like I said, elderly grandparents. And I remember thinking, am I going crazy? Will I know if I'm getting ready to go crazy? What are those triggers? And I think the biggest thing, which is kind of one of these next slides too, is just that I had a support system and a safe place. So that was just that struggling. I wanted to scream. Doesn't anybody realize my baby just died? The world kept going on right on around me. And it wasn't fair at the time. And this is probably, again, exaggerated because of my experience, but he died in the winter, and there were 2 babies that were left, one on the doorstep and one wrapped in a sweater in a trash can in an alley. And talk about that just really shaking you to the core. It's like, why? We loved our baby. We wanted our baby. Why did our baby die? And here are these babies that are being left in, crazy places in the winter, and they were fine. And it's like something's just not right here.
We've got a comment here from Ron. He said, can you help me? My wife and I are having an argument. We had our baby cremated, and we can't agree on what to do with the remains.
We have the same argument, my husband and I, only he was not cremated. He was buried, but my husband wants to be buried with him. And I say, I just want us to be sprinkled. I just don't, I don't want to have to, I want to just, that we're going to all be together anyway. And so we've had a lot of conversations about it. It's difficult. It's very difficult. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a magic wand and everybody just, could believe?
You got any ideas for Ron?
I'm wondering if they can do a couple, and since it's cremation, I'm wondering, and I've worked with people that have done numerous things.
Yes.
They've actually taken, the cremations, and they've divided them. So could they sprinkle, the ashes in various places? I don't know how they feel about that, but does it all have to go in one place?
The other thing is there's beautiful jewelry you can have made now with ashes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different things you can do.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? All the creative things that you can do.
Yeah. I know you can do coral reefs. They actually build coral reefs with ashes. Now, maybe Ron, an idea is to go on the internet and look at some of the possibilities of things that are going on right now with that, and rather than go head on with it, ask questions and look, and make a little activity of seeing what's going on. And sometimes time is helpful, but also I think this group thing is helpful too. I think saying these things, I think just the fact that you come on and text it is an opening.
And Mom, you're making me think of something. The Compassionate Friends has a closed Facebook page for people who had infant death and stillborn death and miscarriages. And so you can join that group as well.
And get some ideas from that. That's a great idea. Yeah. What's your thought on groups? One of the interesting things, because we've been involved with Compassionate Friends a lot, you get a lot of women. How do we get those guys like Ron there?
Surprisingly, we have seen more men being involved. And actually, in our support group in the Indianapolis area, we had some dads that were involved, and even a grandfather who was the president of our support group for a while, and really did a stellar job leading it. It was I think once you get one, then you get more. It's safe territory. But I remember when our son first died, it was only women. And, you know, and my husband was happy with that. Just tell me when you get home, what did you wanted to know everything. But then men started coming and started being peer support counselors for one another. And my husband's made calls before for other dads that have experienced a loss. And, you know, I think there's some camaraderie there and a good opportunity to be able to share.
We found that a lot of times when the men go to Compassionate Friends, they want to not necessarily be verbally active, but they want to be physically active. They want to set the chairs up. They want
Yes.
to, you know, be of service in some physical way.
Yes.
Help people park the cars or whatever it is. That's where they feel best about being there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. When we do events, that is the men or the manpower there that's their support. That's their way of participating a lot of times.
Not everybody's going to show up. I think this group thing, you know, we're looking at this group picture, and I think one of the things that you have to realize is that you're going to lose friends, gain friends. There'll be people who will be there, people who are good grief support, and people who aren't good grief support. So do you have some ideas and tips on things that you can do to remember a baby who died early?
I do. And there's a couple of things, like if for parents, I think be accepting of what your friends want to do for you. So, you know, accept that they want to come and do your laundry, or they're asking if they can do anything. Let them do those things. So that's my first thing for anybody that's trying to be supportive of parents. It would be, you know, I always tell them, don't say, is there anything I can do? Don't ask that question, but rather say, I'm going to come to your house on Tuesday and bring some dinner, and we're going to go through, and I'm going to, you know, help you do some chores or whatever it is. And just tell them, this is what I'm going to bring. We'll make a grocery list. I'm going to go to the store for you. I'm going to do some laundry. I'm going to do your dishes, whatever it is. But tell them, just say that's what we're going to do. Don't ask, because parents generally never want to give you any list of things to do. So then if you're the parent, I always say, be accepting of those offers. So when they say they're going to come and do it, do it. You need to worry about taking care of yourself. So let them take care of all the other things. Some really good things that I've found helpful for me and for others is, and I'm not a writer at all, but to get a notebook and journal. And I'm not a journalist or anything like that, but I got just a plain old notebook and just started writing how I was feeling. And it was a really good opportunity for me when I thought, am I really losing my mind, and will I know when I'm going off the deep end? I could always go back and read what I had written, and I could see I was getting better. I did, you know, I did take 2 steps forward and only 1 backwards this time, where, you know, before I was taking 1 forward and 3 backwards. So it kind of gives you a sense, and it's a safe place that you can write anything you want and kind of feel that burden lifted from you on some of the shame, maybe some of the guilt, some of the things that are weighing heavy on your mind. The other thing is to get some physical exercise. Walk, do some power walking, beat a pillow, chop wood, play tennis, something that gets some of those feelings up and out of your body. And I think those are always good, helpful to kind of cleanse yourself. And another idea is just a little memory box. That's just a place where you can put things that are keepsakes and things that are significant to your baby, your child, because sometimes there's so few things that we have, depending on when the loss happens. So if you have some ultrasound pictures or, you know, some of those things, a bracelet, a hospital bracelet, things like that that you can put in there. I know some parents put something that they can smell of the baby, that that they hold on to and hold those things dear. And it's a safe place, but they can always go to them and visit that when they feel the need and want to. And the other thing I always encourage parents to do is to take an extra set copy of the pictures that you have and give them to a family member or someplace else, because we often have so few pictures and they mean so much to us. But if they would get, you know, damaged by water or fire or something like that, you want to make sure that you have an extra set. So this is kind of that, you know, am I ready? And that next child is called a rainbow child. So, you know, it kind of gives us some, we've talked about all the feelings and emotions, and then how do you know when you're ready? And, you know, if you know, I wanted to get pregnant again right away, and my husband was like, I don't want to feel this pain ever again. And so some of those same discussions that you have to kind of visit and know, you know, I always remember reading things like you can't replace. Well, I certainly wasn't trying to replace. There wasn't a baby that I held that fit in my arms like Jake did, and there hasn't been since. Each of my kids have a different significant, endearing things about them, and he had his place, and those subsequent children came along, and they certainly weren't replacing him, but they were really restored our faith in life and brought us kind of full circle. So that rainbow is a pretty significant thing, I think, that we call those babies rainbow babies. But as we do, you know, we talked a little bit earlier, weren't you scared to death? What, you know, how do you get through those times? I think when I was down, my husband was up, and when he was down, we pushed and pulled each other through that and got to a place where we said we wanted to have another baby. Mm-hmm. Now, when I tell this, it sounds crazy, but it was 9 months before I was pregnant again, which it seemed like 9 years at the time. 9 months was the longest time in the world then. And then 9 months before I had a baby. So it was 18 months after Jake died that we had our first subsequent child. And again, then you've got all the worry of, now I've got this baby and what's going to happen. So yeah. Some things that we talk about at First Candle and do a lot with education is we have some steps for creating a safe sleep zone. And we know that about 25% of the deaths that occur are due to unsafe sleeping. So I just think if you look at that and say, if we could just, everyone knew these recommendations, and we were able to get everyone to follow what those safe sleep guidelines are, that maybe we could reduce, you know, 25% of those deaths. Wouldn't that be awesome? And then we can look at some of the others, and we do more research with finding out what the cause of SIDS and stillbirths and all of that, and then just keep chipping away at all those deaths. But the things that we really talk about for the creating a safe sleep zone, surprisingly, there are still parents and grandparents that somehow miss this message, and I don't think we always do a good job in the timing of when we share this information with parents. They usually get it at the hospital when they've just delivered a baby 24 to 48 hours previously, so they're exhausted, and then they get all this information, and they get a pamphlet, and they get it in a package to go when they take this new baby home, and they're exhausted and don't always get all that information. When I think we really need to start even with teenagers and elementary school children about babysitting and childcare, but then into when we find out they're pregnant, to share this information. That bed sharing and room sharing is really a tough one. When you get up with them, and for so many years we said, don't put the baby in bed with you. And so then parents get up and go to a couch or an armchair or someplace else and feed the baby and comfort the baby and fall asleep there. And those places are more dangerous than adult beds, believe it or not. So there are a couple of things that I kind of recommend. And again, this is meeting parents where they are, because just like grief is very individual and very different and different dynamics, so is childcare, in that, you know, do you have a partner? Do you have someone that shares this job responsibility with you? Do you live with your parents still, that, you know, or do you live on your own that you have no one? So you really have to think about, what's my environment and what's going to be my go-to. So when, if you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, if you put the baby in bed with you and feed them, set your alarm clock to go off in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Have your partner be involved and say, don't let me fall asleep. If I fall asleep, baby goes back into its safe sleep area. If you're living with parents, see if you've got some support system that will come and check on you to make sure. The no pillows and blankets, you can kind of throw all that stuff out and easy enough. But when you're exhausted and it's 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and you have to get up to go to work in another hour or two, it's tough. It's that exhaustion will, we all do things when we're exhausted that we wouldn't normally do when we're, you know, well rested. So often they fall asleep, and I know for the longest time I had a rule at my house: you wake them, you take them. So, you know, we always were just wanted to make sure, but if you got a sleeping baby, you don't wake them up. But there really is a value or importance. Babies that are in bouncy seats or car seats or even swings, that as they fall asleep and they relax, they can obstruct their own airway, especially in the car seat. You know, that the straps can catch them, or even just as they fall asleep, they can just exclude their own airways. We're going to have everyone light candles. It's a great way to, again, memorialize or remember your babies. We're going to have it's a live stream, Facebook. You can see where to join, 7 p.m. all time zones. So I want people to know that they're not alone. And so please use these numbers and websites.
Yeah, and tell everyone about this show. We appreciate you so much being on. Such important information. And
Thanks for
Barbara.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you so much for all the work you do at First Candle.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for your work too. I think together is how we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Heidi and I'm sure Barbara, want to remind you all that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.